What are the 20 worst mechanics of all time? So at MagicCon over this last weekend in Vegas, Mark Rosewater, Maro, ranked him, and he's the head designer of Magic and has been for decades, his top 20 worst mechanics. And it is as follows: Stickers, Megamorph, Companion, Haunt, Annihilator, Devoid, Partner, Miracle, Forecast, Initiative, that's the bottom 10. Top 10, Cleave, Unmemorable, which we'll get to in a second, Epic, Fateful Hour, Day Night, Radiance, Recovery, Sweep, Gotcha, Bands with Others. Now, some of these are very obvious, and this is from a design perspective. These aren't the most powerful, the most broken. These are just things that for the game of Magic don't work in a way that is good. For instance, Band with Others is just one of the most complicated mechanics for people to understand, and the outcome of what you're doing is powerful but not that interesting, so it becomes just really problematic. It's just something that was from old days of Magic on trying to have characters attack together. And just as famously, it's just so difficult to understand what it's doing, and it plays in like choosing blockers and how damage is applied, and it works differently depending on how things have banning. Understandably why it's here. The Gotcha mechanic is a mechanic from Unglued or one of the original unsets, and basically it's a mechanic that, like, when someone was saying a word, you would get a benefit from it. But because that just means, like, the easiest way to not get caught from it is to stop talking the entire match, which then just was bad gameplay. Sweep is just, it's interesting that Sweep is so high. It's just like you return lands to your hand in a large number. I think there's actually some cool stuff to do with it, but I understand why it's here. Recovery is just clunky. It's just like when a creature dies, you can pay that amount of X amount of mana to then cast that spell again. Sorry, just return it to your hand. But the problem is if that creature dies and it's in your graveyard and you don't pay it, it gets exiled. So it's just like this weird clunky spell. I also don't think it deserves to be this high. Next is Radiance. I think Radiance is actually this high more because it was a Boros mechanic in a gold set when it was the set was about having each color have its own identity, and just like didn't give Boros a good identity. Not that it's a bad mechanic. It's just like choose a color and then all creatures of that color get an effect. That's like a thing they use. I actually really don't understand why Radiance is here. Day and Night makes sense, not just because it's like super clunky and hard to keep track of. It was a mechanic made so that Arena could track like werewolves more cleanly, but it also made it so like all of the werewolves from the werewolf set had worked with none of the werewolves ever created before in a way that like was bad. Fateful Hour is like another one that I'm kind of surprised is that high. In it top 10 seems high. It's like pretty unmemorable, which I think like Mark Rosewater, for the record, is ranking like unmemorability is a pretty negative thing, as the fact that like number 9 is a bunch of unmemorable mechanics. Fateful Hour is just like the effects get stronger if you have 5 or less life. I think there's maybe plays to play with that would be cool. I think that's a design space that is actually really interesting. I think they just used it for a bunch of effects that made it less interesting. Maybe it'd also be better just like less than 10 life and make it a little more balanced, but I think that there's stuff to do there. The Epic mechanic, that makes sense. An Epic spell, basically once you cast it, you never cast another spell for the rest of the game. It just recasts it every turn, which makes it just like as soon as you cast a spell, you don't play Magic anymore. I get it. The Unmemorable one feels like a cheat. This feels like cheatsies. It feels like he just wanted to talk about how like unmemorable mechanics aren't great. You have a few of them up here. You could have put one there, picked the worst, most unmemorable mechanic, and then just talk about some other ones in the presentation. Cleave, I like Cleave. I think Cleave's issue is not... I think if Cleave was a Kamigawa mechanic, it was called hacking, this would be like one of the most memorable, coolest kicker X cards. But because it was in the set it was in, it had nothing like it. The cleave mechanic was like you're cleaving words off of a card. This mechanic is sick. It is just flavored badly. I think there's a lot. Devotion is like this. When Devotion was first like made, it was called Radiance, or not Radiance. I forget what it was called. But the Devotion mechanic was not what it was, and it was really unpopular. But Mark Rosa realized like there's a way to theme this to make it more exciting. And I think Cleave has that capability where if this was hack, it would be like one of the coolest mechanics from Kamigawa, but because it was themed this way, it's not good. So I say flavor on this is bad, but actual mechanic is sick. Initiative I get, it just breaks older formats, any 1v1 format possible. I just wish they just added another dungeon card. Couldn't we just get a 4th dungeon instead of initiative? I'm fine with this. This should actually be higher. I agree, initiative was a problem. It's interesting that Forecast is here. I think Forecast is pretty like boring. I think Plot is just more interesting Forecast. I think they made Plot as a updated fix on Forecast. They like made Forecast, they got it out of the world. They like while they were playing it with it out in the world, like, oh, I wish this was this instead, and that's what Plot is, which I'm fine with. I get what they were trying to do, like more for not creatures is an interesting idea. It's just it ends up being not as interesting as you would want it to be. partially because like non-creature spells don't interact with like the stack. They interact on the stack, not in play. So there's less like cool tricksy things you get to do that you get to do with Morph. I am a partner defender with my soul. I think partner is one of the coolest mechanics. I want there to be more partner cards. I think the cat's out of the bag. We already have it. Just like the thing with partner is that it shouldn't have never existed, but it exists. And now that it exists, the more partner cards you add, the less problematic partner is, because those partner cards work together in more cool, interesting, and synergistic ways. When there's the less partner cards you have, the more limited that card pool is, the less interesting the decks you can make out of them are. Just give me 5 more allied 2-color partners, Wizards of the Coast, please. I get Devoid. I think Devoid was the solution for Kindred as a mechanic no longer being around, and they're trying to get rid of it and realize that they wanted to bring it back. I mean, my thought on Devoid is that they should have just leaned more into the colorless as like a 5th, 6th color in Magic that they did in the second set, and that should have been the theme. And Devoid should go away. I'm fine with Devoid not being a thing. I think it's not good, especially since it doesn't work with Commander. It's like a weird Commander not loophole. Like the one place that colorless spells, like colors actually matter, which is in Commander, other than like for casting spells, it doesn't work. I'm good. Get rid of Devoid. If Devoid got over color identity, I think actually it'd be more interesting. Yeah, Annihilator belongs here. I think everyone agrees. I think I'm fine with it. I think I like what they were doing with it, but I get it. Haunt, on the other hand, also belongs here. That mechanic no one understands how that works. I think like from a this is a grokkable mechanic, I think it doesn't belong here. Also agree. Companion is the most broken mechanic of all time. You heard it here first. I do think I want more companions with like commander specific mechanics. So I'm excited to see if that ever happens one day. I like also the idea of like partner if your deck fills all these requirements, you can have this card have partner. That's my favorite version. Megamorph is weird on this list. I think at the time it was considered really unexciting, especially because they've come up with like cooler ways of doing Morph. I think the problem with Megamorph is the name is dumb, and it's like such a small value that it's not really worthwhile. Yeah, that's fine. And stickers should be number 1. The fact that he put it at 20 is just because Maro's mad. Silver Porter isn't as popular. This is the worst mechanic ever created. Worse than bands with others.